Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our Industry Alliance panel. This is an incredibly exciting session where we're bringing experts from diverse fields to have a conversation and an exchange, a dialogue. And we want to also encourage folks here as well to participate. And moderating this session is not only an incredible leader, but it's Mrs. Lanri Tunji Ajayi. She's a respected leader, a global patient advocate with decades of experience in advancing visibility and equity for individuals with sickle cell disease and other inherited blood disorders. She has played a pivotal role in shaping advocacy and organizational governance, not only on a local landscape, but also a global landscape, having founded numerous organizations. Importantly, she is the CEO and co-founder of the GANSID, or Global Action Network for Sickle Cell and Other Inherited Blood Disorders. She will be our moderator today, and I'll let her take the floor.
Thank you so much, Chloe, and good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are joining us from. Today, I am very excited, to have you join this very important panel discussion. Today, our plenary is on Industry Alliance Symposium, and the topic is strategy for effective advocacy in advancing inherited blood disorders, regardless of where you are. So today we have industry leaders, clinicians, members of the patient community together at one table, giving us an opportunity that we do not want to take for granted. Each of our panelists brings a unique perspective that is essential to understanding the challenges we face and the solutions we must shape together. So we're looking forward to an open, insightful, interactive conversation that helps us move closer to better care, better access, and better outcomes for the individuals and families that we serve. So let us begin. As previously mentioned by Chloe, if you have questions, please put them in the chat, and we will take, your questions. And I also want to encourage everyone joining us at this session to also put in who you are and where you are joining us from, so we can get to, engage with you a bit better. Thank you very much. So without taking much more of the time, let's begin. The first person that I would like to, call upon is Dr. Titi Fasipe. She's going to provide us with a clinician role in advancing improved health outcomes in inherited blood disorders. And I have one or two questions for you, Dr. Fasipe, but before we do that, I'd like to introduce her. Dr. Fasipe is the co-director of the Texas Children's Sickle Cell and Thalassemia Program, and also the assistant professor of pediatrics in hematology oncology at the Butler College of Medicine in Houston, Texas. She is passionate about public health strategies to curb the psychosocial barriers and health complications of individuals with sickle cell disease. She is actively involved in various sickle cell focused community and policy efforts aimed at understanding and addressing these challenges. Dr. Fasipe brings a unique perspective as she is a pediatric hematologist as well as an individual living with sickle cell disease. And I can tell you that she's passionate because I do work with Dr. Fasipe at one of the GANSID working groups. So welcome, Dr. Fasipe, to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So my first question to you, Dr. Fasipe, is I would like you to share your advocacy story as a clinician working in the pediatric hematology space in the US.
Okay, thank you so much, Mrs. Tunji Ajayi. It is an honor to be here today, and I want to thank the organizers of the GANSID Congress for inviting me to participate. So, I did not appreciate the advocacy role of physicians until I had been working in the clinician space for about maybe 2 or 3 years. Um, but early on, even in my medical school stage, I realized something was missing. I didn't realize advocacy was what was missing, but I knew there was something missing to my education. So I was born and partially raised in Nigeria and also partially raised in the United States of America. And my initial goal of entering medicine was because I felt we needed to cure sickle cell disease, which is very important. And I only focused on the disease as a disease. When I entered medical school, I realized that a person and their disease is much more than just what's inside their body. It's also the society that they are dwelling in. And it became clear to me that for individuals with sickle cell disease around the globe, everywhere around the world, they face some kind of disparity in regards to getting quality health care for them, whether that's a person living in Nigeria, or a person living in the United States or other countries. In the United States of America, it was quite striking because sickle cell disease is considered a rare disease in that country, along with Canada and European countries. And so, in addition to being a disease that has stigma with the pain associated with it, it also has the issues with being a rare disease. This makes it a disease that needs advocacy in order to move forward. I first learned about advocacy from the community. I would realize that community-based organizations, similar to what Gansett is doing, they were advocating all along and telling people like me, other doctors, that, hey, we need to do more for sickle cell disease. Um, and that's when I realized that an essential ingredient to becoming a physician, and especially a physician that's going to work with a population like sickle cell disease, was to incorporate advocacy in my career. So that's a little bit of the background. Um, I will say that uh, you mentioned I have sickle cell disease. I didn't realize the power of my voice until those moments because I was actually scared and maybe I don't know if ashamed is the right word, but definitely I was not open about having sickle cell disease in my early career and in my training because I saw the negative associations with it. But the power of finding my voice allowed me to find community, such as the people in this room and the people listening. And that has been a strength. And I think together that's what allows sickle cell to proceed. So I'll stop there and see if others have questions or additional points.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fasupe, for allowing yourself, I would say, to be vulnerable and to share your own personal story, which I think is, I'm sure many people are listening now and they're like, wow, if you can become a doctor and you have sickle cell, then my child can be. So thank you so much. It's very powerful. And I think people like myself, I consider you as an hero. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Um, I
Appreciate that.
will I'll still come back to you, have another question for you, but I really want to touch with another individual with lived experience, Anova teenager in the thalassemia space. And Anova is also another hero of mine and someone that has done amazing work in India that I can begin to say. So I will introduce Anova. Anova Taneja Mukherjee is a lawyer by training and our 17 years of experience in advocacy. A thalassemic herself, Mukherjee has been working for the cause of thalassemia since her early years in thalassemic India. And as early as 2006, while still a student of law in New Delhi, at New Delhi University, Mukherjee represented the thalassemia patients of the SSK Hospital in New Delhi before the relevant authorities in the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare for establishing the daycare center for thalassemia at the state hospital. Welcome, Mr. Niger, to our platform today. I want to ask you, given the work you do in India, can you provide some examples of advocacy work done to benefit the thalassemia, um, community in India? If you can also add for us the challenges perhaps that you encounter and how you also overcome, these challenges. Ms. Anuba, thank you.
Thank you, Landry, and namaste from India to all of you.
Namaste. Namaste.
Um, I'm really glad to be here, and you are my hero as well. And the speaker who spoke before me, I mean, it just blew my mind away. I mean, to see a doctor, sickle cell anemia. I mean, I used to think of being a lawyer with thalassemia as a great thing, but now I have somebody who's a doctor. I mean, hats off. Um, Coming to your question, Landray, so there are very many examples of successful industry advocacy that we thalassemia patients have done in India. So one that I really am proud of and would like to call out is the advocacy that we do for safe blood in India. So India is unfortunately thalassemia capital of the world, which also means that we have too many people requiring blood transfusions on a regular basis, which in turn means that we are that much more prone to transfusion transmitted infections like HIV, HCV, and hepatitis. Um, I myself contracted hepatitis C in 1997, which changed the direction of my career. Wanted to be a doctor, and then, but I had to sort of choose black coat over white coat. Um, that's when I thought that I need to do something about hepatitis. And I think industry advocacy has been one of the best tools to achieve safe blood in India. So we basically identified companies who would be interested in doing in advocacy, maybe media advocacy on safe blood. And that's when I reached out to the industry companies as well as industry bodies like Confederation of Indian Industry, and I found those synergies that um, they wanted to do something about save blood. And we came up with this whole media campaign together, without naming any particular product or any particular solution. We talked about the technology, and we talked about how for instance nat technology should be used for save blood. And today I'm so happy to share that because of the sustained advocacy, we have in many states of India, the state governments have adopted nat technologies. We've also done a lot of demonstrative advocacy with corporates where we set up this labs with the help of corporate social responsibility, which is the kind of money that corporates have to spend as per the law of the land. And we try and do that matchmaking, that which is the corporate that wants to spend that kind of money, and which is the corporate that wants to work in the area of save blood. So I think that kind of aligning your social agenda with their business agenda is one great example that we did for save blood. So I think I would stop there, and if we have more time later, maybe I can talk about other examples. But yes, you can check out our save blood campaign, and that's the biggest example of successful industry advocacy that I can think of.
Amazing. Thank you for all of the great work that you're doing in India. I'm coming back to you, but I'll quickly go to Daniela Aluch, um, who is a passionate global advocate and project manager with more than a decade of experience in the nonprofit sector. She also has a background in nursing and currently completed a master's degree in data analytics. and she's very deeply passionate about using data as a tool for advocacy in transforming complex information into actionable insights that influence policy, inform decision making, and strengthen health system. Ms. Daniela, it's always a pleasure working with you and alongside you at Gansit. My first question to you would be why is data such an important part of advocacy for inherited blood disorders, and how can it make our collective voices stronger no matter where we live? Thank you.
Yes, so greetings everyone, and thank you so much to the Gansid Congress planning team for this amazing opportunity. It's such an honor for me to be with all of you today among amazing panelists and as someone who's passionate about data. So I'll just briefly discuss how powerful data is when it comes to advocacy, because data doesn't also need to be complicated or technical. It just needs to be simple and make our collective voices stronger. So it helps transform, for patients and families, data helps us to transform their lived experiences, for decision makers and policy makers to drive influence and make policies that will impact patients and families in a positive way. So at its core, data is just simply information that helps us understand what is happening to our patients. And it can be numbers, it can be facts, it can be patterns that we notice in patients' experiences. And then we use this to describe, inform, educate, and in our case today, advocate for change for our patients. So families living with inherited blood disorders know the realities of pain crises, hospital visits, missed work or school because of the disease that they're living with. So these experiences tend to remain invisible for people outside the community, but data changes that. So it turns it into evidence, and then the evidence becomes a way where policymakers and health system cannot ignore and now influence policy making. And if you attended the registry session, you heard what Dr. Little, Dr. Chunda Lioka, and Dr. Adekile said about registry. So it just shows, I'll give an example. If a patient in a rural area or community has to go for a clinic checkup, but it takes them like once a month, as opposed to someone who lives in an urban area who has the ability to go to a clinic more frequently, it gives us an evidence whereby government and hospitals need to now create more clinics for people in rural areas. That way they don't have to go like travel a long distance to go to get their checkup, or also in case where medication is lacking, that data will help the hospital now provide more medication to patients.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I just want to give shout outs to people who are living so far away from Eastern Standard Time, like Malaysia, and they're still on this call. I know it's so late over there, so thank you for staying on. I'm seeing Malaysia and Africa and those places on the chat. Thank you, and thank you so much, Daniela, for that insight. I love the examples you've given, how data could really help to bring our voices together in advocacy. Now, I'll go to Dr. Benson Huzoma. Dr. Benson Huzoma is going to talk to us about his company, Novartis, and we want to learn how Novartis is collaborating with patient organizations to advance advocacy in inherited blood disorders. Before I ask Dr. Zoma my question, I want to introduce him to you. Dr. Zoma is a distinguished physician with experience across clinical practice, surgery, business, and healthcare administration. He currently serves as head of patient program for Novartis in sub-Saharan Africa, where he leads the design and execution of patient-centric initiatives across the region. He works with governments, patient organizations, clinicians in his role and you can definitely read more about Zomer in the Gansett book. Welcome, Dr. Zomer,
Thank
to
you.
this interactive session. My first question to you would be, how is Novartis partnering with patient advocacy groups to co-create solutions that address real-world challenges faced by individuals living with inherited blood disorders? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Larry, and a very good day to everyone on the call. At Novartis, we pride ourselves in reimagining medicine in order to improve and extend the lives of people. And part of what we have done is to reimagine our approach to our strategy and business. Very importantly, we have discovered that the patient is actually the most important stakeholder in our landscape. And based on that, one of the most important things we've done for sickle cell disease in particular is to set up what we call a patient advisory council, which is made up of patient advocates and strong voices across the globe. The likes of Lanre, Liwimba, Arafat, Timi, Eunice, Selena, and others are members of this advisory council. And what we do with the council is to sit with them to provide to us the perspective of the patient. And based on the information they provide, we're able to structure programs, activities, and advocacy moves based on the exact needs of the patient. I think this is the way to go so that in all our advocacy programs, we are providing programs that meet the exact need of our patients. Now, let me go a bit to some of the day-to-day challenges that people living with sickle cell disease and other inherited blood disorders may have. One is around providing access, right, to medication, and what are we doing around the high cost of treatment, working together with patient advocacy groups. We've been able to work together with patient advocacy groups to drive the inclusion of hydroxyurea in the essential medicines lists of certain countries. For example, in Ghana, we have hydroxyurea as an essential in the essential medicines list. And in Tanzania, we work together with patient advocacy groups to drive the discussions around reimbursement of sickle cell disease treatment. Around newborn screening, through partnership with patient advocacy groups and programs like the ASH CONSA, we've been able to co-create strategies to drive universal newborn screening, starting pilots in Tanzania, in Kenya, and now beginning to escalate to other countries. Let me maybe round up. I see Larry is looking at me around what we've worked together with patient advocacy groups to drive educational programs, right? Because of the shortage of skilled healthcare professionals in various countries. We have the Ahodo Sickle Cell Program in Ghana that was able to train over 3,000 healthcare professionals across over 100 clinics, integrating sickle cell care into primary healthcare system. In Uganda, we've been able to partner with patient advocacy groups and, of course, the Ministry of Health to strengthen the sickle cell ecosystem through providing training and national strategy integration. And lastly, the peer-to-peer program we've done in Ghana as well, training over 500 frontline physicians to equip them, to provide excellent care to sickle cell disease patients. Just for the want of time, these are just a few I could item. I think the last one, Larry, let me mention the last one. Around
Okay.
education, around education, we discovered that people watch more movies than they read books. So we work together with a patient advocacy group in Nigeria called SAMI and Imzigo Pro. Imzigo is a word that talks about burden to develop a movie, a movie, worked on a movie that would help to showcase the day-to-day realities of people living with sickle cell disease. And this was premiered in Nigeria a few weeks ago, and we believe that this will help to drive education and reduce, discussions around stigma, etc. Thank you, Larry.
Thank you. Amazing. So our panelists, please also check the Q&A. There are some questions there. If you're able to answer any of those questions, that would be great. Without taking much more time, I will go on to Miss Jenny Davis, joining us and representing AGIOS. I have a question for you, Miss Jenny Ms. Janet Davis, which is about how agencies collaborating with patient organizations to advance advocacy in inherited blood disorders. I'd like to ask you what your biggest learning in rare blood disorders is. Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone. I'm so honored to be here and to be talking with you all today. At Agios, in working with advocacy, our work in rare hemolytic anemias, inclusive of thalassemia, sickle cell disease, and pyruvate kinase deficiency, some of our biggest learning is to pull all our critical stakeholders, whether that's patients, physicians, advocates, and caregivers, and bring them together. And it's an opportunity to create an environment to learn from each other and co-create solutions. Then the community can collectively use their voices to raise awareness to make meaningful impact. As an example, we brought together three rare hemolytic anemias with the red cell revolution, and these stakeholders have come together to work on very unique opportunities that come across all three disease states. The project they're currently working on is a qualitative study, and it is looking at mental, physical, and emotional fatigue across all rare hemolytic anemias. And their goal is to raise awareness in a revolutionary way. And the interim results will be shown at ASH this year. And I will tell you as a preview, they are revolutionary. What we've learned is that the power of these stakeholders working together from a peer-to-peer perspective, learning from each other's uh, different experiences, lived experience as a physician, as a patient, as a caregiver, as an advocate, and then being able to create solutions for the community. And that's been very impactful overall.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. And I will quickly transition in the same, on the same notes, quickly transition to Angela Gilkeo from Roche. And briefly, Angela is a senior director in the Global Patient Network team and in the clinical research strategy and engagement catalyst at Roche. She joined Roche Canada in 2018 as a senior manager within the federal government relations and policy team. And in 2020, she transitioned to the global patient partnership team to take on a newly created role focused on patient-centric research and development in the solid tumor space. In 2022, Angela moved to the hematology franchise, assuming responsibilities for the sickle cell and the AHUS patient communities. And so, without taking much more time, I would really love everyone to hear from Angela on what does alliances mean when thinking about making advancements in inherited blood disorders such as sickle cell disease.
Thanks so much, Lannery, and thank you to Gansett for inviting me to participate in this panel. I really appreciate it. Lannery, I'm going to take a little bit of liberty and maybe react to some of the feedback that was provided by the other panelists, and I really want to double down on what Daniela talked about around patient experience data and leveraging patient experience data as part of engagement with regulators and with HTA bodies. I think everyone might know that EMA just recently published their reflection paper around patient experience data and the importance of that data as part of regulatory decision making. And I think that's an interesting area for us to work collectively on, right? As we're thinking through R&D and thinking through collecting data within our trials, really understanding from the patient community what is meaningful, what are meaningful outcomes, how do we collect data, whether it's within our trials or outside of our trials, but aligning that with the patient community to ensure that the data that industry is collecting is meaningful to the patient community, whether it's sickle cell disease or thalassemia or any trial, and ensuring that that data is then available to be able to include as part of our advocacy efforts when we're thinking through either engagement at a regulatory level or at an HTA level. So really, I think there's a unique opportunity in terms of a spotlight being put on patient experience data as part of decision making when either at a regulatory level or at an HTA level. So just wanted to share that. Janie, I think you kind of stole a little bit of what I was going to say in terms of like alliances, right? I think generally what ends up happening is we end up working in our own little silos to try to move try to move issues forward within a disease area. We think there's a role for the patient community, there's a role for industry, there's a role for medical. And I have to say that I had attended the fourth Global Congress on sickle cell disease in Paris. And one of my major takeaways from that Congress, and that was 2 years ago, is the need to come together and work together collectively. It is not just one stakeholder's role to move to move a disease area forward. I think that's traditionally what we've done in other disease areas, but I think sickle cell disease lends itself to breaking those silos down, bringing the community together, and really working collectively to help move the needle forward. Because I think we can all recognize that there's a high unmet need in the inherited blood disorders space. I mean, I work in sickle cell disease, so I'm very partial to that side, but I think there's a lot of needs that are still unmet. And so how do we bring those walls down and come together and work collectively together as we in order to move the needle for patients? So I think that's these were my top
Amazing,
thoughts
amazing.
around it. Yeah, sorry, Leonard. The other thing I think is important is understanding that everyone is not at the same place from a capability perspective, advocacy
Mhm.
capability perspective, and making sure that like when pharma or when industry is thinking about supporting patient organizations, that we earmark some money towards helping to build capabilities within the community, because I think what is going to be important is strengthening the voice of patient advocates when they are speaking with regulators and speaking with HTA bodies alongside to be able to advocate for access for medicines that are so important for their overall quality of life. So I'll stop here.
Oh my gosh, that
Highly
is
passionate, highly passionate.
you are highly passionate, and thank you so much for that insight. It's really eye-opening, and I think for some of us, while we understand and we know that we must work together, I think by hearing this reiterated again, I think it's very important. I'm going to quickly jump back to Jenny, if that's okay. And I would like to properly introduce her. I apologize, I didn't do that much earlier. Jenny Young Davis serves as the Director of Global Patient Advocacy at Aegis Pharmaceuticals. She's bringing more than 25 years of distinguished experience as a pharmaceutical executive. Jenny is a passionate advocate, and she's deeply committed to empowering patient communities through advocacy and the transformative power of shared story. And so, Jenny, I want to ask you another question. When you work with the patient communities, how do you prioritize the collaboration? Thank you.
Janie, I think you're on mute.
Thanks, Angela. I think many times what we talk about in is working collaboratively, and how do we prioritize those collaborations because there's such a great need in community, and in the models that we've created with community, as we talked about before, the stakeholders, and whether they're patients, physicians, advocates, and caregivers, again, they share the gaps that they've identified in community, and that's critical. So one of the areas we've worked in at Agios is the Thalassemia Advocacy Advisory Council, the AAC, and what they've identified as a notable gap in health literacy on patients living with thalassemia. And specifically, some patients lacked understanding about the realities of the long-term consequences of thalassemia on their health and their daily lives. And so, with this collaboration, we launched a global patient health literacy survey to better understand these issues. And it was done across and in collaboration, much like Angela spoke about, industry and working across advocacy in organizations and physicians as well. The survey uncovered surprising gaps in knowledge, and the results will be released at ASH this year. I know it's a lot of coming soon. ASH is in December here in Orlando in the States, and it'll also be published in a white paper. So in 2026, what we'll be working with the Thal Advocacy Advisory Council is to implement these initiatives to help close those identified gaps. We also worked on a similar model for a pyruvate kinase deficiency community, and what they identified was physician and patient communications as a key area of opportunity. And there again was a global survey that was done, which resulted in a white paper. And what we found in this ultra rare disease, it has been downloaded more than 4,000 times. So these are examples of the power of working collaboratively, prioritizing what the community is saying is their priorities, and identifying opportunities through connections as well. So it's a great way and a great model to use across the different disease states and with advocates across the globe as well.
Amazing. And I think that would tie nicely into me going back to Anuba and asking Anuba about what tips she could give us to leverage the strength of industry and collaborate for the benefit of the cause. Thank you, Anuba.
Thanks, Landry. I think first of all, what I need to tell my patient friends is that many a times we tend to think of industry only as somebody who can fund. We only think about corporate social responsibility and raising funds, etc. So I think we should first of all think of the industry as a stakeholder, as a partner, and not as somebody who's there to fund us. Also, look at the low hanging fruits. That's another tip, because somebody in the chat box wrote about competing priorities of the government. I think if we can identify what is in it for everybody, because government also has their priorities, and if we can bring together everybody and use the mantra of greater good for greater number, I think everybody will get aligned. So instead of having your eye on the fund and then working backwards, I think you should have your eye on what is it that's important to the nation, to the patient community, to the industry, and try and bring all those agenda together. Secondly, I think because people wrote about priorities, especially in countries like India, where we have 1.4 billion people, sometimes you have to combine agendas. So if I speak about thalassemia alone, somebody else speaks about sickle cell alone, it might not really help the government. But if we look at a common minimum program or common agenda, like blood for instance, or pain, something that runs horizontally, and we bring 3 4 communities together on that particular topic, I think that is something that the government really listens to. So disability, rare disease, blood. So trying to use the horizontals instead of the verticals is also one tried and tested strategy that I can definitely talk about. And last but certainly not the least, I think unified voice, because when we talk about India, we talk about 29 Indias. It's a huge country, and everybody is, asking for something that matters to them. Um, so I think what we should really do is come together. Somebody wrote about a coalition here, and say what we want to say in a unified voice. Not everybody can agree to each other, but we can find those 2 3 points on which we agree, and then pursue that with full force. I think that those would be the tips according to me.
You have actually just reiterated the whole goal of Gansett, bringing voices together and co-advocating. To your point, if we all go separately, Sometimes it's overwhelming even for the government and their resources. But if we find common purposes and we put those together before the government, there's better opportunity to get what we want. So thank you so much, Hanover. I will go back to Dr. Fasipe, and I would like, as a clinician, for Dr. Fasipe to advise us. We want to learn more about, so if other clinicians also wants to learn more about how they can also advocate, right? Become effective advocates for inherited blood disorders. What are the tangible steps that they need to consider in order to be an effective advocate in this space? Thank you.
Thank you. And I just wanted to commend all the various chats and conversations, quite stimulating. And thank you to the prior presenters as well. I'm learning a lot and agree with so many points. So if you are a physician and you're questioning whether or not you're an advocate or whether you want to get into advocacy, there are several levels. I see it as going from local to state or regional, depending on where you live, to national, international. And depending on who you are, your sphere of influence may be at any or more than one of those levels. So, at the local level, if you are a clinician, you have patients. The first step of advocacy is listening to your patients and hearing their stories and really appreciating outside of that clinical space who they are. One way to do this is to go to community-based organizations, events, and programming in your local community. And thankfully, there's so many like this one that are on virtual platforms where you can be a person listening to the minds of what the community is saying, understand what is important. So that's the first lesson of advocacy. It's not about you, it's about the patient, and the points that are important to them. As a clinician, you also have things that are challenging to you that you may consider as important too. Just make sure that what your voice is saying and what the patient's voice are saying are complementary, and that they feel heard and seen. Let's say your local community or state doesn't really have a lot going on. You don't have a local organization. There are other entities like GANSID that have established spaces for advocacy, and they make it very efficient and easy. In the United States of America, we have our physician organization, American Society of Hematology, and they have several advocacy pages. And then also, I would recommend sickle cell organizations. So again, not just physician organizations, but sickle cell based community efforts and learning from them. And they will also give you organization like, hey, this is how you advocate for this issue that we all care about. So I see it as it doesn't have to be big and splashy. You don't need to be protesting on the street. It really starts with having conversation with your patients. And the one last thing I'll say, help your patients advocate too. At my institution, we have a blog where sometimes the stories come from our children. They write, or their parents or caregivers, where they share about their lives and allow the entire hospital community or clinic community to learn from their advocacy. Advocacy is in so many different ways, and it includes being a lawyer, just doing your job and being wonderful as a lawyer, like we discussed, and just being you, and doing the best that you can with the gifts that you were given.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that insight. I'll go back to Anuba. Sorry, to Daniela. Daniela, for patient organizations or countries with limited data, where is the best place to start? And what is the most important first step in building data-driven advocacy?
Oh, yeah. Thank you for that question, Ms. Lanner. So I'll say for countries with limited data, the best place to start is to just simple and small. It doesn't have to be a complicated registry. You just have to collect the most important data for your community. So what you can do is to collect the patient's demographic, their treatment and care access, symptoms and health experiences, and you can just collect it as a survey or even have it on a Google spreadsheet. or even just do a focus group with the different CBOs and patient organization groups. And what this data does, it will help build credibility, because as patients and health advocates, when we walk into meetings with policymakers, our story is powerful. But when we have like hundreds of data points, it becomes undeniable and influences positive change. And I also wanted to say another powerful step about collecting the data is being transparent about it. There are gaps. If there's a gap, you can also say that we lack data in this particular disease area. For example, sickle cell, aplastic anemia, or thalassemia, and that alone can motivate policymakers to support better data collection. And finally, partnership makes a huge difference. So if patient organization groups come together to collect data, this will definitely in the future, like form a national registry. And so the best place to start is to start small, start local, and be consistent about collecting the data.
Amazing. Thank you so much for answering that question. I'm going to go back to Benson. Um, I want to ask you in 2 minutes, what strategies has Novartis implemented to ensure that advocacy efforts translate into tangible improvements in patient access, education, and clinical care for sickle cell? I know you have mentioned some of them before, but if there's any other thing that you might have missed that you'd like to add, we can do that in 2 minutes. Thank you, Benson.
Thank you, Larry.
You're
So
welcome.
our approach is to make sure that we listen to the patient community and put to action what the patient community is saying. That is just what we need to do. So, for example, several talks were happening several years ago around clinical trials not happening in sub-Saharan Africa, even though we have the highest burden of sickle cell disease. So we brought clinical trials to sub-Saharan Africa. That's one. Secondly, we also listened to the patient community, and there was a lot of discussion around the fact that a lot of awareness is happening around sickle cell disease, but nobody is talking about sickle cell trait. So we went ahead to start a sickle cell trait campaign, still working together with the patient community to drive that education. Furthermore, we discovered that there is some level of gap around the capacity of patient advocacy groups to drive strong advocacy engagement with government and to also raise adequate funds to drive their activities. So we started up a capacity building program for patient advocacy groups. We started with the fundraising masterclass few days ago, and we are going further to begin to upscale their ability around driving engagement with government. So you see, these are some of the things that we're doing to make sure that what the patient community is saying is being actioned and providing outcomes to impact positively the patient community around hemophilia, sickle cell disease, and the likes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I will transition to Angela. Angela, another question for you is what can industry do to continue to advance science around inherited blood disorders like sickle cell?
Yeah, thanks so much, Flannery. I think it's answering those hard questions, right? Making sure from a research perspective and making sure that the results of that is made available, not only to the medical community, but also to the patient community as well. I think the other piece of it is also really, taking a step back and investing time to really understand the foundations of a disease with the patient community, understanding the disease burden, both from a patient and a family perspective, the unmet needs, expectation of future treatment, any patient pathway barriers that patients and families face, to really support the patient community holistically, but bringing that thinking back in and shaping the work that we are doing from a research perspective. So we are bringing transformative medicine and medical care to the patient community. I think the other piece that's really important is having consistent engagement with the patient community. But as you think through, and I, would love to share this point with my industry colleagues, is when you're thinking about pulling together community or a council or a patient expert committee, bringing in diverse voices, right? Diverse voices both regionally across the globe, but also from a stakeholder perspective, right? So bringing in lived experience, caregivers, family, patient-centric HCPs as well within the context of that conversation, and bringing that holistic view to really shape the work that's happening internally. So these are some of the things that I think we should be doing. And again, it's how do we bridge? It's from the first point that I think Janie made as well, is how do you ensure that you have a bit of a medical mix perspective, a holistic voice that's shaping the work that happens within a company to help move the needle on medicine development.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I think we should transition to some of the questions being asked by participants. So we have three. Thank you, panelists, for answering three of those questions. We still have 8 questions opened. So this first question is asking, how will we collaboratively pool and deploy funding, staff, and political capital based on a single long-term systemic change metric, for instance, 5-year policy implementation rate, not just law passage? What written agreements would define the equitable contribution and reporting necessary to maintain a shared focus? Can any of our panelists is willing to take this question from Imo Shuja? So they're talking about how do we, pull things together, right? And at the same time also share, in the contribution, in the reporting, such as when we are maybe developing policy implementation and so on and so forth. It's all about working together. How can we do this collaboratively and effectively? Thank you. And anyone can unmute that feels like they want to answer that question. Thank you. I don't want to put anybody in the spot, but I would like somebody to volunteer to give it
I think it
a
looks like
start.
Miss Davis or Miss Tunisia. Yeah, maybe one of them would be would be good.
Okay,
So,
sure.
Landry, if it's okay, I can take a shot at that. I mean, I'm
Sure.
not too sure about, all the inclusions, but I get the drift of it. Maybe what the person wants to ask is, how do we put this whole thing together if we are talking about a coalition or any kind of a program for that matter? I'm not sure about that political capital, but I can tell you that in India, we have been there, done that, where we have a government program called Thalassemia Bal Seva Yojana, which means thalassemia uh, children welfare scheme, where the government has set up this collaboration between the government, a public sector undertaking, and our NGO is the implementation partner. And there is this huge program where this PSU, which is the industry that is putting in money for bone marrow transplantation. The whole monitoring is being done by the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, and the whole coordination, protocol setting, and political capital usage and everything that's being done by our NGO. And it is not only a 5-year program, it's I think it's in the 4th year right now, and it will go on. So I would say the entire the main ingredient of this whole thing is intention. If somebody had that intention to roll out this program and brought everybody together, all the stakeholders together, and they're just doing this whole program. So I think the idea is to get everybody together first, identify what is it that you want to do, where you want to go, and then start rolling. So that was a live example of how you can come together.
And then just to add to what Hanover just said, like in India, for instance, like, Gansett is supporting the thalassemic patients organization there. So with a global group, a local group, government, and also a private entity, right? Because Death for All, access to Death for All, even though the government is providing in the hospitals, it's the supply is not as it should be. So we're working together to get Death for All more accessible. So you have the private, you have you have government, you have patient group, and all of everybody coming together. Also can also be a one way that we can all contribute and to improve outcomes for people. So thank you for that question. The
And
good,
Landry, I think I'm sorry because he asked about the written. What can be the written? And as a lawyer, I have to answer that, right?
sure,
So
that's great. Thank you.
uh, I think you can have memorandum of understandings, and the program that I spoke about, and what Landry is also speaking about. I think it's good to have a memorandum of understanding or a document which describes roles and responsibilities of each party, and that will help you really identify who does what. So documentation, Landry, you can always put the person in touch with me.
Sure,
Just
definitely. Thank you. And I see a question in the chat that's also talking about essential drugs. So I just mentioned about this for all. So I think maybe we can pick that. So Ruth said, morale is usually high during advocacy and sensitization. However, beyond advocacy, how do we make essential drugs for sickle cell and thalassemia readily available and accessible, especially to indigents? Again, if I can answer that quickly, I would say advocacy is important to make sure that your government is able to ensure improved access. And you have to work with the patient groups and your clinicians. I always say everybody has to work together, and I think it's being iterated on this platform today to say industry partners, they are stakeholders, right? They have a stake in this. Also, clinicians have a stake, patient community have a stake. And if you co-advocate with your government, it might not always be the same month that you start advocacy, you're going to get your answer. Sometimes it's fast, sometimes it takes years, but you got to be persistent. You got to do it to make sure that your ask, you receive answers to your ask. And you do it collaboratively. Not everybody going differently to the same people and talking about the same thing, but go together. That will really drive, improved outcome for your advocacy question. So second question here, Dr. Donnell Hyvee said, as mentioned by Dr. Fatipe, sickle cell disease and other blood disorders are rare diseases. As we have new therapies for sickle cell and other blood disorders emerge, what are strategies we can use to get governments to pay attention to the importance of developing systems to improve care, particularly when these governments often have competing priorities with more common diseases? So, Dr. Fasipe, would you be able to give that a try? Thank you.
So both that question and the one before I felt had so many elements
Yes.
to them. Um, for sickle cell and thalassemia, I feel one of the things is to remind our governments or educate them that though they're rare disease in our context, in the higher income countries potentially, they are not rare diseases when you think about it globally. And so most governments tend to have a global view of how their policies impact groups. And administrations can be different, so some may prioritize it higher than others. But it is more than just the people that they see in front of them in their own country. And sometimes that is a powerful tool for certain policymakers to understand the bigger scope of it. And the fact that the population numbers are growing in the higher income countries. Back to the data point, showing data is power. So let's say that your administration is maybe not as focused on the global and they want to just focus about their own country. I will echo all the points that Ms. Daniela made about data. showing where the high need areas are, showing them, making it real, tying it to patient stories is essential. And what the story for United States, which Dr. Ivy has actually been part of, was making it real allowed for initiatives to be created specifically for sickle cell disease, and that has been in several government agency spaces. I find the question challenging because I do recognize that countries are different. There's different approaches, and so I feel it may not be a one solution for all. But I think essential ingredients are tying it to the stories of the individuals impacted and trying to give some numbers to make it real. I don't know if others on the panel have other thoughts on that.
Yes. Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd love to weigh in. I think at the end of the day, what you need to understand is what is motivating, government. What do they, what are the pressures in terms of making those decisions? What kind of data can you generate to show how you can alleviate those pressures, right? So, we've done some work and we've published in the past around, and this is more in the MS space, right? The productivity gains, and understanding that if governments were to, fund a particular medicine, what does that mean for, an individual staying within a working environment, right? So it's taking the story that Dr. Titi just talked about, but tying it to data that makes a compelling reason as to why government should reimburse. So it's tying the two together in order to enable data-driven decision making. I hope that's
Thank you.
helpful.
Very helpful. Thank you so much to our panelists. You will see on your screen the poll. Please complete the poll so we understand better how this session has gone. If we did everything right, if there are things that we need to do better next year, please let us know. And if there's any other topic you think we should be bringing, next year for this industry symposium, please do let us know. While you're completing the poll, I also want to say that we're going to be transitioning in about 3 minutes into the last session, which is a Pfizer sponsored session. And somebody has nicely put the link in the chat for everyone. But I also want to address also a comment from Opong that the government should help in providing the drugs or reducing price of drugs. And I agree with you 100%, but that would not come by many times, except with effective advocacy. And I just want to mention that I put in the chat a module, like an e-course online link from the Gansett has that has a lot on advocacy. So for patient organizations from different countries on this platform, you can please take that link and look at those models and take those models to help you and strengthen your advocacy. Advocacy is the key, and persistence in advocacy is also the key. I always say that because I know people sometimes get discouraged if they're pushing for something and it's been 2 years and 3 years and they're not getting through. But you got to stay on, and then you will eventually get through. So I want to thank everyone again for being on this panel, and I want to thank our panelists. You've really provided rich insight that really is going to help all of us to be effective in advocacy and to be able to work together more collaboratively. So thank you again, and we see you at the last session, which I believe, and if the Gansett Congress team can confirm, for me, can people stay on this Zoom link to access the next one, or do we have to get out of this one?
We have to get out of this one.
We have to get out of this one. Okay. So the next one starts in 1 minute. So I'll see you all there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Namaste. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.